Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to give you a tour of one of my favorite places, and that's my workshop. The reason my workshop is one of my favorite places is because I love tools and I love working with them. And I love making things for people that they enjoy. And I love working with wood. I'm going to kind of explain the layout of my shop and introduce you to some of the tools. I've got a couple of special friends I want you to meet, and kind of a little background on how I do what I do and why I do it that way. So stay tuned, it's going to be fun. I know I'm going to enjoy it, and I hope you do too. My name is James. This is Homestyle Woodcrafts. To start, I want to give you kind of the big overview of the shop. So this is the third bay on a 3-bay car garage, and it is about 10 feet wide from the wall to the shelving. And it's about 23 feet from the door back to those shelves. So it's not a huge shop. It's not even a big shop, but it is so much bigger than what I used to have that I love it. There are three big issues that kind of impact how I've laid things out. One is overall my tools really aren't that mobile. The second is I don't have a good dust collection system, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Third, I only have one wall to work with. I have shelves over here, which are great. And our shelves back there, and those are great, but they don't have the advantage of a dedicated wall. So I got one wall. All of those things put together kind of have impacted how all this is laid out. So for our tour, we are going to start up here, and we'll go down this wall, and then we'll loop around and come back up this side, and we'll end where we begin. So hang on, it's gonna be fun. So this is my Wen 10-inch bandsaw. I found it really useful for doing kind of broad curves and also more detailed work. And while every saw deserves to be treated with respect and use the appropriate safety precautions, overall I feel like this is one of the safer saws I have. As far as why it's up so close to the door, it's because it's not on a mobile base. I had originally put it on slats so that I could drag it around. Here, let me show you. There you go. Can you see those slats? I put them on there so I could drag it around. But dragging it around didn't really work that good. Surprise, surprise. And now I do something that's probably even worse, which is I lift it. I kind of put my arm under here, and I just kind of move it closer to the opening of the garage door here. So I don't have to move it far. So it's not that mobile, and because I don't have dust collection for it, I want it near the door. So that's kind of why it's there. Great tool, love it. This is my Wen scroll saw. And it's another tool that I love. I've made a lot of stuff on this, and the stuff I've sold and given away as gifts. In fact, for people who want to make a little money doing woodworking, I think it's a great idea to start out with a scroll saw, because you can make some really nice things to sell, like at craft fairs and other things like that. And for the price of an entry-level scroll saw like this one, you can quickly recoup the cost of the tool. And I also want to say that while I certainly wouldn't consider myself an artist, I've seen a lot of stuff that people have made with scroll saws that really rises to the level of art. You can do some amazing things with a scroll saw. This is an entry-level scroll saw, and there are some limitations with it, but overall it's been a really good tool. Now I have it mounted to this board right here. It's a piece of MDF, and then I use these F-style clamps to mount it to this Husky portable workbench. And the workbench itself, while it's been good for the scroll saw, it hasn't been awesome. Because I think it's a little too lightweight for the amount of vibration that the scroll saw produces. In fact, you may see I've got this dumbbell here to add some weight. This is a tool that I don't move typically because it doesn't produce a lot of sawdust. So I can just kind of set in front of it, do my work here, and with relatively little cleanup, everything works out just fine. This is also a pretty safe tool compared to like a router or a table saw. To me, it's a great addition to the workshop. Down here, I have this piece of foam, and what I use this for, I almost hesitate to say. But sometimes when I'm cutting stuff with my compound miter saw and I know it's going to fall, I'll just put this on the ground below it and it catches it with without damaging the wood. Okay, you make do with what you got, right? And then down here underneath it, I've got my compressor, and I've just always kept it in the box. So when I use it, I just drag it out there and plug it in and fill it up and use it. It's actually been quite a handy tool. All right, now to my workbench. I built this a long time ago, and I brought it with me when I moved to this house. It's been really great. It's made out of 2x4s and MDF. It's pretty sturdy, and it's been so handy. I picked MDF for the top because I wanted something smooth and something that would be relatively inexpensive to replace. And I have replaced the top once in about 20 years, I would say. As you can see, I've got pegboard up here to hang tools, and that has been so very handy. One of the tools that's hanging here that you can see, well, okay, it's not a tool. So I've got this shop apron, and it is so handy. I feel like it's a great added layer of safety when I'm working with tools like a table saw or anything that might have kickback. It's got pockets like this up here, and it helps protect my clothes from sawdust. So having a shop apron, I love it. Here's a little better view of the bottom part of my workbench. There's a shelf down here that I use for storing toolboxes, tool bag, miscellaneous parts, things like that. Very handy for some extra storage in the shop. Above my workbench, I've got pegboard, like so many people do, and it's super handy for hanging tools. I've got my multiple tape measures here. You've got to have at least 3 or you'll never find any one of them. If you have 3, you have a chance of finding one. I've got my squares, which of course are so handy. Up here, I've got this long shelf, store my clamps on it. I've got some bits like router bits and Forstner bits up there, sandpaper, this box labeled gloves. I store my gloves in it. And then I've got tools. Up here, I store some newspaper and some paper box lids. These are really handy when I want to spray a finish or something like that. The shelf is supported by these brackets. These are used in closets, and this holds that dowel that you hang your clothes on. But what I found in the workshop is they're really handy for hanging stuff like hearing protection and, you know, other stuff. I also use these brackets to store my spring clamps. So I just clamp them up here. Have some here, some here. Earlier I mentioned that I wanted to introduce you to a couple of friends of mine, and here they are. This is Niles Crocodile and Gary the Alligator, and they come visit and help me out with my projects sometimes. Say hi, fellas. They don't say a lot. They're more of the stoic kind. You may have seen them in some of the videos I've made, and probably show up in some more. This jigsaw is one of the tools I keep stored up on my shelf, and I just kind of wanted to point it out for a couple of reasons. I bought this a few years ago to replace an old Craftsman jigsaw I had, and it performed pretty good, but it had a U-shank style of blade, which meant you had to insert it and then put in or tighten up a screw to tighten the blade down. This has a T-shank style, and it's toolless, and that's really great. Another feature that I like about this jigsaw is that when I use it, it projects a light down on the work surface, and that is a game changer. So I'm not a tool snob, but there are some features that are really handy to have, like that, like the ease of the toolless blade installation and the light. Next to my workbench, I have this work table, which is great because I can sit at it and use both hands to really focus on a project. Honestly though, mostly what it does is collect stuff so that when I actually do want to sit down and work on a project, I have to kind of clear it off. I keep my fasteners over here. I have the ubiquitous bucket of miscellaneous parts. I have a first aid kit, and I've got rags, plans, variety of the paper stuff. Underneath it, I have a shop vac, and I've got part of my collection of cutoffs. And of course, what workshop wouldn't be complete without a container of sidewalk chalk? You never know when the artistic impulse is going to hit. I wanted to point out a feature of the shelf, which is I just hung a dowel across a couple of those brackets and put some paper towels here, and pretty handy for cleanup. Okay, let's head over to the back of the shop now. We're gonna go mobile here. All right, so down here you can see more of my cutoff collection. I'll tell you, wood is so expensive these days. I hate to give anything up. So I collect a lot of the smaller pieces, and there's where I keep my taller pieces and some of my flat stuff like MDF or plywood. This bookshelf didn't really fit well when we moved into our new house, so I put it out here. I made it part of my workshop. Up here we've got, you know, stain and glue and stuff like that. These boxes are project boxes. I've got different supplies and old projects in various stage of completion. I've got books here. These are my woodworking books. I've also got car repair and camping books. So it's my outdoor bookshelf. And then below the bookshelf, I've got more projects. These are like owner's manuals and stuff like that. This is an old candy machine thing I made, and projects in various stages of completion. These are toy parts and more projects. Here's a baby cradle I made for my daughter, and a birdhouse. And over here, this really isn't much part of the workshop. Got camping and canning stuff over here. But I also have my extension cords. I do want to tell you a funny thing about this shelf. When we moved over here, we thought we could put it into the back of the U-Haul, but it would not fit. It was too tall. So what did we do? Yeah, that's right. We cut it in half and then reassembled it when we came back over. Just couldn't leave these shelves. They're too handy. For lighting in my shop, I use one of these ultra bright LED spaceship looking lights, and it works really well. It brightened up my shop a lot over a regular light bulb. I also use this Hyper Tough shop light. It works great at night, especially if I'm working out on my driveway. And then I also use my garage door opener light. And honestly, a lot of times I also open the door to my garage to get more sunlight. Okay, we're now ready to head up back toward the front of the workshop. This is the far end of the shelving unit over here. And at the end, I store some of my bigger pieces of cardboard, you know, for like painting, covering things up, things like that. Also, I've got an extra piece of pegboard over there. If I have any larger sheet goods, I can stand them up here. This is a DeWalt portable workbench, which I really like. I've got 2 of them. I use them especially when I want to take things outside to do sawing and those kinds of activities that create a lot of sawdust. I've got here kind of a box of cutoffs that I intend for the fire pit, and here's more of my cutoff collection. I've got my cutoffs kind of in a few different places throughout the shop. This stuff right here probably looks like a workstation, but it's not. It's actually a pile of different parts of different projects and this really cool old lantern. This is an old compound miter saw that I borrowed from my sister-in-law to clean it up and see if I can get it back into shape for her. I have a SawStop table saw, the contractor model, and I have to say, I love it. My first table saw was a Ryobi table saw, and I've done a video about that if you want to see it. It was a good table saw. There came a point when I wanted to upgrade my table saw, and so I started doing research, and I came across some kind of mid-range contractor style saws that looked pretty good, to be honest. And I almost got one of those. But as I did more research and came across more and more information on the SawStop and its safety benefit, I realized that I wanted a SawStop. I knew that in the very instant that I cut a finger or sustained a serious injury while woodworking with a table saw, I would have regretted not having a SawStop. So that was a big reason that I got the SawStop. In addition, it's just a really good tool. When I put it together, I was so impressed with the quality of the materials. Now, I originally intended on getting just the configuration that included the 2 stamped steel wings and the smaller fence. But as I looked at the different options, I started kind of going back and forth on which fence did I want. And so I asked a woodworking friend of mine what he thought, and he unhesitatingly recommended this bigger fence. And he said that I would never regret getting that one. And I have to tell you, I did get it, obviously, and I have never regretted it. Now, to upgrade to this fence, I had to get the larger table. And so I do have kind of this big table saw in a small shop, but it has been fine. The mobile base works really well, and I'm able to move it around as I need to. And so I have just been very pleased, not only with this fence, but with the table saw in general. I wanted to give you a closer look of my dust collection system as it is. So I've got a box that sawdust falls into, and then I've got this, you can see it kind of hanging there. And what that is that's just an old piece of dryer tubing that I had on hand. And it's when I have the saw in place, I drop that bucket to the ground and it's gravity fed. So it does collect sawdust, but it's not great. So now we're back up toward the front of the shop, and I wanted to show you what's on these shelves. So I've got tools that I commonly use on these shelves. So like down here, I've got a belt sander and a palm sander. I've got my circular saw. Over here, I've got my compound miter saw, and I've got my router table. Now, the way I use the compound miter saw and the router table is I'll get one of my DeWalt portable workbenches, and usually I'll set it either right at the garage door or right outside the garage door, so I can get all that dust going to the outside. So in that sense, yes, they're mobile, but I am looking for a better mobile solution. Up here and on this next shelf, I've just got some of the things that I've done, some of my projects that I still have that I either haven't given away or sold, or ones that I'm going to keep. And I've got some other things for inspiration, kind of like this car fell off a wreath we have at Christmas time, and I thought, oh, that'd be cool to model a wooden car after that. Okay, a moment of truth. There are a lot of things I can do to improve my shop, and I'm really excited to do that. But the fact is, I'm having a lot of fun in my shop right now, even though I don't have an awesome dust collection system, and there are some other things that I could improve. The point is, have fun with what you've got. If you enjoy tools like I do, and making projects like I do, I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel, because that's what I'll be covering. And I hope to do it in a fun and interesting way. There's 2 areas I would really like to improve on in my shop, and one is tool mobility. What I'd really like to do is have each tool be on its own mobile base. So I'm going to be working towards that. And the other thing I want to make some improvements on is dust collection, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that really drives where I can use my tools without making just a giant mess in my shop. So right now I use a dust mask to protect my lungs, but I move tools up front to protect my shop. And I'd like to minimize the amount of dust, both for my own safety and for my shop. So those are 2 areas. So what I'm going to be doing as I make improvements is I'll be making videos about that. So if you want to kind of watch the journey of my shop, then come along and watch those videos. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Here's another one up here in the corner that I think you'll like. Thanks for watching.